My name is Adrian Vale. I am 32 years old. Last Monday at 7:15 in the morning, 2 police officers were standing in my living room holding a warrant for my arrest. The charge: stealing my own sister's identity. Behind them in the corridor of my building, my sister Vivian stood in a perfect cream cardigan, tears running down her face, phone pressed to her chest like a prop. She was performing grief the way she had been performing everything since she was 4 years old. "She's dangerous," she told the officer at the door. "She's been spiraling for years. She's been forging my documents to destroy me. I have everything." From Tampa, on speakerphone, my parents joined. My mother's voice was smooth and certain, the way it always was when she had rehearsed. "Officer," she said, "Adrian has been mentally unstable since she was 12. We have documentation. We have sworn statements. Please be very careful with her." My father said nothing. He never did. But I could hear him breathing. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not look at my sister. I looked at the lead detective and said, very calmly, "Please allow me to bring one folder from the hallway closet." They had no idea what was inside. They had no idea that folder was about to dissolve everything they believed was true. Before I tell you what happened when they finally opened it, take a moment to like and subscribe. Drop your location in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from, because this story traveled a long way to find you. The first thing you need to understand about my family is that I was never the daughter in the photographs. If you had visited the house I grew up in, a small craftsman in Lakewood, Colorado, about 20 minutes from Denver, you would have walked through the front door and seen a long row of framed portraits of my sister. First communion, elementary school graduation, high school senior photos with the soft focus background and the practiced smile. There was one photograph of me, taken when I was 6 years old, leaning against a wooden fence in the backyard in a yellow sweater. That fence still exists. The photograph was never updated. Every time I came home for a holiday, I would straighten that frame. It always tilted slightly to the left, as though even the wall couldn't fully commit to having me there. My mother is Beverly Vale. She worked as an elementary school nurse for 23 years. Her voice sounds patient even when it isn't, and she used language the way a conductor uses a baton, not to describe the music, but to control it. Vivian was creative. Vivian was magnetic. Vivian was sensitive in a beautiful way. I was dramatic. I was intense. I was, eventually, difficult. My father is Richard Vale, retired civil engineer. A man of few words who had somehow turned his silence into the most powerful language in the house. I learned early that when my father didn't speak, it wasn't neutrality. It was a vote. And it was almost never cast in my favor. My sister is Vivian, 2 years younger than me. She has gone by Viv since she decided at age 4 that her full name made her sound, in her words, like someone's great aunt. My mother thought that was charming. My mother thought everything about her was charming. By the time I was 9 years old, I had mapped the system. The same behavior carried 2 different names in our house, depending entirely on which daughter performed it. If Viv cried, she was sensitive and expressive. If I cried, I was making a scene. If Viv wanted attention, she was creative and spirited. If I wanted attention, I was needy. If Viv told a lie, it was a misunderstanding. If I told the truth, I was causing problems. I remember one summer afternoon, I must have been 9. My mother was at the back fence talking to our neighbor, Mrs. Drummond, and I was sitting in the grass behind the hydrangeas doing absolutely nothing in particular. I heard my mother say, calm as reading from a grocery list, "Adrian gets so worked up about the smallest things. Viv just lets things roll right off her." I sat very still in the dirt. I had not been worked up. Not that day, not that week. But my mother had described me to a neighbor with such complete certainty that I understood something for the first time. The version of me that other people knew was a version my mother was writing. I had no access to that manuscript. I could not edit a single word. I could only watch it circulate. When I was 11, I started writing things down. Not a diary. Diaries were for feelings, and I had learned early that feelings were inadmissible in our house. What I needed were facts. Hard, dated, specific facts. Things no one could talk over or reframe or explain away. The first thing I ever recorded was a piece of paper folded into quarters with one sentence in pencil. Viv took my homework on Tuesday. She returned it without page 3. Page 3 had a sticker on it. I dated it. October 17, 2005. I folded it and placed it inside an empty shoebox under my bed. I did not know yet what evidence was. I just knew that memory wasn't enough. By 11, I had already lost too many arguments to my own recollection of events. I needed something my mother could not talk over. I didn't know then that the shoebox under my bed was a rehearsal. The real file would begin 1 year later, and it would eventually become thick enough to change everything. The real file began on October 14, 2006. My grandmother's 75th birthday party in Boulder. My grandmother, Constance Vale, my father's mother, lived in a tall wooden house on a quiet street north of the university. The house smelled like cedar and hand cream. The porch had 2 rocking chairs that seemed to exist only to be looked at. We drove up that morning in my father's Subaru. I was 12. Viv was 10. The aspen leaves had turned that week, gold and copper and amber, and they were plastering themselves to the hood of the car as we pulled into the driveway. My mother handed Viv the wrapped present to carry inside. I was given the card. The card was thin and forgettable, which suited my role. The party was modest, 20 or so people. Cousins, neighbors, a few of my grandmother's old friends from church. My Aunt Janice was there with her daughter, my cousin Celia, who was 14 and reading a paperback in the corner because she had no patience for small talk. She glanced up at me twice that afternoon. The way someone glances up when they're not quite sure what they're seeing. After the cake, my grandmother went upstairs. When she came back down, she was holding the cedar tray from her jewelry chest, and there was a gap in it. Her emerald ring. The one her own mother had left her. The one she had told me, when I was 7, would come to me someday. Gone. The room went quiet in a way I had never heard before, a silence with weight in it. Viv, rosy-cheeked and steady, said in a small, careful voice, "I think Adrian asked to try it on earlier. She just wanted to see how it looked. I told her not to." My grandmother looked at me. I had not touched the ring. I had not been upstairs. I had not opened my small jewelry case, an orange plastic case shaped like a fruit that played a music box tune when you lifted the lid, all day. Not in weeks. My mother walked to the guest room where my coat and bag sat on the bed. She opened the jewelry case. The emerald ring was inside. My grandmother's expression shifted from recognition to something closer to loss, not of the ring, but of me. The version of me she had believed in. My sister looked at me with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had just watched a plan complete itself. On the drive home, I counted streetlights between Boulder and Lakewood. There were 41. I counted because I could not cry. My parents thought I was asleep. I was not. My mother said, "She needs help, Richard. She's the unstable one in this family. We have to do something before she destroys another family event." My father said, "Make the appointment." That was the first time I heard it said so plainly, the unstable one in this family. It would be repeated, in some version, every year of my life until I was 32 years old. 2 weeks later, my mother drove me to a child psychologist's office above a yoga studio on Pearl Street in Boulder. The waiting room had a saltwater tank with a small clownfish that a laminated sign told me was named Murray. The psychologist was Dr. Eleanor Marsh. About 50. A gray cardigan the same shade as her hair. She had the deliberate, unhurried quality of someone who had been listening to people for a very long time. Dr. Marsh saw me twice. She asked about school, about Viv, about what I liked to read. She did not ask me about the ring. I think, looking back, that she already had her own theory, and it did not involve me. After the second session, she asked my parents to step in without me. I sat in the waiting room and watched Murray the clownfish make slow loops around a piece of plastic coral. I could hear them through the door. Dr. Marsh's voice was low. I caught one sentence clearly, crisp as a bell. You should be paying much closer attention to the other daughter. This girl is not the one I'm concerned about. When my parents came out, my mother's face was wearing the careful blankness she used when she had decided not to listen. She paid at the front desk. The receptionist handed me a small blue visitor sticker, the kind that goes on your shirt when you visit a medical office. Number 0419 printed in black. I peeled it off and put it in my pocket. We did not go back for a third session. That night, my mother told me Dr. Marsh had said I was going through a phase. She said to be a better sister to Viv. I knew at 12 that going through a phase was not what Dr. Marsh had said. I had been standing just outside the door. I had heard the sentence about the other daughter. That night, I took the shoebox out from under my bed. I added the blue visitor sticker. I wrote the date beneath it. I labeled the box, in my own head, not out loud, the keeping box. A year later, I moved everything into a manila folder. I did not keep that sticker because it meant something sentimental. I kept it because no one else was going to. The folder grew slowly. The way scar tissue grows. I don't want to walk you through every entry, because the point of a pattern is not the individual moments, it's the accumulation. Once you understand the shape, all the individual incidents become interchangeable. But there are 4 I have to tell you about, because they explain how the folder became what it eventually was. Entry 1. I was 15. April, 2009. Viv was 13 and in 8th grade. She forged my signature on a hallway pass to skip a class at her middle school. I found out when I came home one Thursday afternoon to find my mother sitting at the kitchen table with a photocopy in her hands, faxed over by the assistant principal that morning. "Adrian," she said, "you're the older one. Why would you do this to your sister?" I looked at the signature. It was not mine. The slant was wrong. The crossbar on the V in my last name was too short, like someone imitating handwriting from memory. I said as much. My mother said I was making excuses. I was banned from my first school dance. Viv cried about how terrible she felt for me. My mother told her she was being so incredibly brave. The next day, I told the assistant principal I wanted a photocopy of the past to study my handwriting, to learn from the mistake. He gave me one. I took it home. I put it in the folder. The folder at 15 was about a 1/4 inch thick. That was the year I learned that forgery has a particular feeling. It feels like being made to apologize for the shape of your own name. Entry 2. I was 20. Fall, 2013. I was a sophomore at the University of Denver. My mother had added Viv as a supplemental user on a credit account nominally in my name, because I was older, and because the university required a parent-linked card for emergency tuition payments. Viv was supposed to use the card for textbooks. In 3 months, she spent $4,800. When the statement arrived, Viv sat at the kitchen table and cried and said that I had taken the card while she was visiting me and used it on someone I was seeing. There was no one I was seeing. There was no unauthorized card removal. I was in Denver. The statement showed transactions in Boulder, at coffee shops and a boutique on Pearl Street. 6 of those transactions had timestamps that matched, to the minute, the hours I had been sitting in my midterm examinations 2 hours away. I had the proctor sign-in logs. My father got on the phone and said, "We'll handle this as a family. Don't make it harder than it needs to be." They applied the amount to the following semester's tuition. I worked 2 jobs that spring to replace it. I made clean copies of the statement, the proctor records, and the timestamps. Into the folder they went. The folder at 20 was about an inch thick. That was the year I learned that timestamps were the best witnesses I had. Entry 3. I was 25. November 2018. Thanksgiving at my Aunt Janice's home in Fort Collins. 14 people at the table. Halfway through the meal, Viv, 23 and fully polished by then, leaned forward in that careful, gentle way she had been developing since she was a child, and said, "I'm only sharing this because I'm genuinely worried. Adrian has been seeing a therapist for stalking a coworker. We think she's going to do something. We're scared." There was no coworker. There was no stalking. There was no therapist. There was Viv. And there were 14 relatives who all turned to look at me at the same moment and recalibrated everything they thought they knew. I said nothing. By 25, I understood that defending yourself in front of an audience someone else has already coached is a waste of the only air in the room. That night at 9:14 p.m., my cousin Celia, 26, working as an accountant in Fort Collins, sent me a text message. That didn't sit right with me. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything at the table. I want you to know I noticed." It was the first time in 25 years that anyone outside my immediate family had quietly, privately admitted to me that they saw it. I did not reply right away. But I saved the screenshot. I did not know yet how important Celia would become. My closest friend from college, Phoebe Crane, was planning her wedding. Viv contacted Phoebe and said she was secretly organizing a surprise on Phoebe's behalf. Could Phoebe send $3,200 to cover a vendor deposit, and please not tell me about it because it was meant to be a surprise? There was no surprise. There was no vendor. There was a digital payment trail that ended 4 days later at a hair studio in Cherry Creek. Phoebe called me 4 months later, the week before her wedding, in tears, asking if I had somehow taken the money. I paid Phoebe back from my own savings. I did not tell her the full truth. Some friendships survive only if you let them keep the easier story. Phoebe is still my friend. She does not know, even now, everything that happened. The payment screenshots went into the folder. By 28, the folder was thick enough to be a textbook. By 28, I had stopped appearing only in Viv's stories. I had started appearing in her receipts. There was one more entry I did not fully understand when it happened. The summer of 2020. Viv sent me a text message in July. "Hey, what's Mom's maiden name again? I'm working on a family tree project for a class." She was 24 years old and not enrolled in any class. I sent her the maiden name. It was such a small request that I almost didn't save the message at all. I saved it anyway. It is on page 19 of the folder. In 2006, that text would have looked like nothing. By March of 2026, it was the first entry in the timeline that broke the room. If you have ever been called dramatic for telling the truth, or sensitive for noticing a pattern, or unstable for keeping a record, drop one of those words in the comments right now. I read every single one. The vocabulary never changes, does it? It's always the same 3 or 4 words. And they always belong to the same person in the family. By the time I was 32, I had built a life that looked nothing like the house in Lakewood. I moved to Denver after college and never moved back. I rented for 8 years, and in 2023, I bought a small condominium in the Lower Highlands, just across the river from downtown. 1 bedroom. 1 bathroom. A galley kitchen and a window that fills with late afternoon light every evening. Behind the kitchen, there is a narrow hallway closet that I have used, for the entire time I have lived here, as a filing room. I work as a senior forensic auditor at a regional insurance group. I have been there since 2018. I was promoted to senior in January of 2025. I am a certified fraud examiner. My entire job is to read documents until I locate the precise place where someone has lied in writing. I am very good at it. I run my own credit report once a quarter through my employer's monitoring service. Or I thought I did. My close friends are few and durable. Phoebe from college, who married a kind man named Owen in 2022 and lives across town. Marcus Ellery, an attorney who started as a forensic accountant before law school and who began consulting for our firm in 2021. And Celia, my cousin, who I had been texting intermittently for 8 years since that Thanksgiving in 2018, but had not seen in person since 2014. I had not gone no contact with my parents. I had gone low contact, 3 visits a year, 2 calls a month. I kept the door cracked. Mostly for my grandmother. Partly because hope is the hardest thing to lay down. I was about to learn it was also the most expensive. My grandmother, Constance, had moved into a memory care facility in Boulder in 2019. By 2024, she no longer recognized me. I still drove up twice a month. I would read to her sometimes from a book she had loved, a novel she'd had on her shelf for as long as I could remember, the kind of story about ordinary people doing quiet, enduring things. She did not ask who I was. I kept going anyway. I kept the green visitor sticker from her facility, a small oval with the number 0816, in the folder, right behind the blue one from Dr. Marsh's office in 2006. 2 stickers. 18 years apart. Same handwriting on both, hers, on the sign-in sheet, from when she was still herself. That was the only handwriting of my grandmother's I still had. My sister, meanwhile, had become something I could no longer avoid even if I had wanted to. In 2021, Vivian reinvented herself. She had been a flight attendant for a regional carrier for 2 years. Then a real estate assistant for 1. In the spring of 2021, she launched a social media account called Pure Clarity with Viv. By the end of that year, 30,000 followers. By spring of 2023, over 400,000 across 2 platforms. She sold a digital course called Healing from a Toxic Family. It cost $389. Her signature line, the one she closed every video with, was, "My truth is sacred." I did not follow her account. Her content found me anyway. The algorithm has a particular sense of humor. One reel from February of 2026, filmed in Aspen, had 1.3 million views. In it, she said in that practiced, gentle voice, "Sometimes the most toxic person in your life is the one who's closest to you. Sometimes she's even your sister." The top comment had 14,000 likes. "Viv, you saved my life with your course." My sister had taken the exact word my mother had applied to me at 12 years old, packaged it into a $389 digital product, and sold it to hundreds of thousands of people. I had spent my entire career learning to locate what other people hide in writing. I did not yet know that my sister had been hiding inside my own social security number for 6 years. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in early December of 2025. I was at my desk working on a third-party audit. The number was unfamiliar. I almost sent it to voicemail. I picked up because my grandmother's memory care unit sometimes called from rotating numbers. A man's voice. Polite. Professional. "Hello, this is calling from a collections firm regarding an account ending in 8261. Am I speaking with Adrian Vale?" I said yes. He told me the account had been delinquent for 14 months. The outstanding balance was just over $11,000. He asked how I'd like to resolve it. I asked what type of account. "A consumer credit card. Issued in 2022. From a regional bank I had never used." I asked for written documentation. The PDF arrived in 7 minutes. The cardholder name on the application, Audria M. Vale. The address, a UPS store mailbox in Aurora, Colorado, that I had never set foot in. The contact phone number, one I did not recognize. I sat at my desk for 22 minutes without moving. Then I did the only thing my training had prepared me to do. I opened a spreadsheet. I pulled credit reports from all 3 major bureaus that night. The reports were 46 pages combined. There were 11 accounts I had never opened. The total outstanding balance across all 11, $89,200. The largest single line item was a personal consolidation loan for $63,500, issued in March of 2024. The application address was the same UPS store mailbox in Aurora. I had employer-provided credit monitoring. It had flagged nothing. The reason became clear once I started reading. 9 of the 11 accounts had been filed under subtle name variations. Audria Vale. A.M. Vale. Adrian M. Vale with a middle initial that does not exist on my birth certificate. Different addresses. Different phone numbers. The monitoring service's matching algorithm had never connected them to my actual profile. It was the exact technique we caught sophisticated fraudsters using in our audits at least twice a month. I had simply never thought to run it on myself. Over the following 3 weeks, I built a full forensic timeline. I pulled signature samples from every credit application. The signatures on all 11 were the same hand. It was not mine. I cross-referenced the originating IP addresses on the 7 accounts opened online. 6 of them resolved to a residential internet router, whose service bill had been screenshotted to me 3 years earlier by Viv, when she asked to borrow $800 and wanted to show she was actively trying to pay her own bills. I matched the bill to the application metadata down to the router's serial number. 3 of the accounts had been opened from a burner phone. The number matched one Viv had texted me from in 2021 when she said she'd been locked out of her primary device. I drove past the Aurora mailbox location on a Saturday morning in January. Parked across the street. Did not go in. I had already found on Viv's social media a photograph of her standing directly in front of that same storefront, captioned errands/gratitude/blessings, dated June of 2023. I worked on the file most nights from 11 p.m. onward, alongside my regular audit work. I built it the same way I built every case file at work. Bates page numbers in the lower right corner of every single exhibit. Cross-referenced names, dates, IP addresses, phone numbers, and physical addresses against 3 separate databases. The working files lived on an external drive I unplugged every night and stored in a small safe behind a bookshelf. The forensic examiner in me knew that the chain of custody on my own evidence would eventually be challenged. I made certain that chain was airtight. The strangest part was the calm. I had expected rage, the kind that eats sleep. Instead, I felt something I can only describe as relief. 20 years of small things, the homework page, the hall pass, the credit card, the Thanksgiving table, the wedding loan, had finally arrived at a destination I could name out loud. I was no longer the older daughter who could not let things go. I was a forensic auditor with a documented case. On January 29, 2026, I filed a federal identity theft report. I saved the confirmation number. I noted the date. I did not file a police report yet. I wanted the full forensic timeline complete first. I did not file incomplete cases. As it would turn out, that discipline saved everything. In the first week of February, I flew to Tampa to see my parents. Their new place near the waterfront. I said nothing about the investigation. I made small talk about my grandmother. I ate the pasta my mother had made. I helped my father rearrange a bookshelf. I left on a Sunday evening flight. On the drive to the airport that morning, my mother said something I almost didn't catch. "Adrian, have you been checking your credit report lately?" I told her no. She nodded. She was smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "You know how Viv worries about you," she said. "She just wants to know you're okay." On the plane back to Denver, a thought settled over me like weather. The folder was not yet complete. But the people I was building it against had already started moving. The warning came from Celia. Monday, March 2, 2026. 6:17 in the morning. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Adrian, I heard something at a family brunch yesterday. I don't know what's going on, but I screenshotted something Viv sent your mom 3 weeks ago. I think you need to see it." The screenshot loaded. An iMessage thread between Viv and my mother. Dated February 8, 2026. Viv had sent it without knowing it had been forwarded into a small group message that included Celia's mother, who had unmuted the thread for just long enough that Celia had seen it and captured it before it was gone. The message read, "Mom, listen. If she keeps digging, we need to file first. We need her to look unwell before she has time to talk." I read it 3 times. I sat up. I did not turn on the light. I made coffee. 8 minutes later, my doorbell rang. 2 officers in the corridor. The lead was in his mid-40s, thick mustache, the tired eyes of someone who had been doing this job long enough to have opinions about it. The family dynamic I observed is a significant concern behind him, and I believe the wrong child has been brought to me for assessment. I am unable to continue treatment of the older child unless the family agrees to family therapy one hand and the younger child is independently evaluated. Pressing a folded tissue to the corner of the paragraph. Officer Daniels held up a document more slowly. Ms. She checked the bottom of the page. We have a warrant for your arrest. There was an authentication You're welcome to come voluntarily. Verified copy released to detain subject Adrian Vale. The charge is November identity theft, 2025. I looked at the warrant. Looked up. I looked at my sister Marsh last November at Officer Daniels. She remembered me. Officer, I said. She had been waiting 20 years for someone to ask the right question. He looked at the closet. She is 71. He looked at me. She still practices. As long as it's part-time. Not a weapon. Her records I asked are if intact. I could make a phone call first. Detective Whitmore was quiet yes. for 6 seconds. I called Marcus she turned Ellery to tab 1. He answered tab on 1 the second was ring. The current case. I told him in 11 seconds what was happening. IP address origination records. Listen carefully. 6 matching the residential router no whose service bill without had screenshot you give them your name, your date of birth, clean printouts and the word of that bill alongside the application folder metadata. Stays closed identical until I say so. To the modem serial number. 12 minutes from 3 the station. Accounts traced to a burner number matching the one over Viv Officer Danielle's speakerphone in 2021. My parents joined the UPS store mailbox in Aurora. My mother paired with Vivian's own Instagram photo standing directly in front of that storefront. Unstable since she was 12 years old. All 11 have forged application, side by side with my actual signature card from a credit union forging in 2019. She has been making comparison against her sister without any special equipment. Very careful with her. The capital letter in my first name leaned too far right. Viv in the hallway had turned her face toward a neighbor's curved the wrong direction, angled so and then there was page 7 suffering clearly. Page 7 was the documentation Vivian had submitted with her March 1st police complaint. She has been forging my records for years to destroy me. I had forged in her name to destroy her. The signatures on those documents read Officer Daniels asked me to place my hands behind my back. Something Viv had not anticipated. Without the handwriting on those forged the restraints were not tight, in slant, the kind pen pressure for in the particular formation of her initials. Before he led me a hand that had forged to the hallway signatures on all 11 fraudulent accounts. Winter boots. The same middle shelf had manufactured both I no longer needed. Detective Whitmore set behind a small box of replacement light bulbs to the bridge of her nose. In handwriting I had used forensic auditors make that exact long gesture. It is the gesture of someone who has just realized the single file they are holding from the front entirely upside down. Half an inch she turned to tab 2. Sealed with 2 rubber bands. Was the 20-year 6 colored tabs visible at the top edge in chronological order. Open it. The hall I tucked it under my arm, closed the box. Closed the supplemental credit card and turned around. 2013. Officer Daniels the Thanksgiving dinner. The interview room was on the second floor of the wedding loan station of 2022. Fluorescent lighting. 8 additional entries I have not described today to the floor because the point of a paper cup is the pattern. I did not the catalog. A small red camera in the upper corner near the ceiling. She closed the Marcus tab. Arrived 4 minutes after I was uncuffed at the doorway. I kept a record, promised, I said. He sat beside me, opened a lined notepad. She tapped the cover of the folder twice with 2 fingers. I recognized the gesture quietly. It is what an auditor does when she has just realized that the deeper she goes, the more she is going to find. Early on the screen behind us, Vivian's face was frozen in the still frame of her paused statement. The deliberate mouth slightly of someone who had sat across from a great many people in the folder like this open and had developed reliable for another 6 minutes. She carried a red case file to tab 1. She read me my rights from a federal identity theft report I had filed on January 29th. The file. 6 weeks before Vivian filed her own 11 fraudulent credit accounts opened in the name of Vivian Vale. One outstanding balance, hand, approximately $89,000. 31 days. A documented pattern, said, the complainant alleged to herself, escalating impersonation, direction, signature forgery, she picked up and emotional manipulation. She asked a colleague to bring Vivian Vale follow evaluation from the 2006 interview documenting the alleged perpetrator to place a hold on processing my charges. The complainant had also submitted notarized he intended to be present from both parents. Marcus said Detective Whitmore, while they stepped out steadily. The desk phone rang. Detective Whitmore, this evaluation dates to when you were 12 years old. She covered the receiver sworn statements are consistent with what your sister has described. She says she has corroborating documentation you are facing. She says she has been maintaining it since 2019. She slid a laptop across the table and pressed play. Detective Whitmore put the call on speaker the night before. Detective Whitmore, filmed in her living room, said. Her voice was level and a carefully positioned book visible. I have on the supplementary documentation that corroborates what my cousin has provided. She's the message screenshots in this group chat archives. She always has dates. We have a psychological evaluation since November she was 2019. My parents and I are everything to your department. But we can't keep protecting her. My truth is sacred. She had and my truth is that my sister has been spiraling for a very long time. I was the only one keeping receipts. I had not been the only one. Detective Whitmore I had just been the only one who knew it. I watched her Detective face. Whitmore I had spent 8 years reading the faces of people across interview tables. I sat alone with Marcus in human resources offices where someone's professional life was about to change. I looked at the folder, still open on the table between us. Detective Whitmore's visitor sticker was visible at the edge of tab 3. She had read the file. Number 0. She had seen the affidavits. I thought about she had been doing this long enough 71 years old, 90% of cases end who had written the paperwork in 2006 and the paperwork had folded into a kitchen drawer at me and never spoken. She had also been doing it long enough to know what a genuinely calm defendant looked like, ask the right question. And that a calm defendant I thought about identity theft case who had been building her own file innocent or extremely sophisticated. In silence, I matched while my folder grew in a closet 2 hours south of Vale. We had been keeping the same record without knowing the other existed. 20 years is a very long time to believe you are alone in seeing something clearly. I picked up the folder through the wall. I very faintly on the table. I heard Detective Whitmore's voice across the brushed metal surface Vale until it stopped. Can you explain why the IP address associated with your device matches the origination file charges for 9 of 11 fraudulent accounts filed in your sister's name? 3. It's organized chronologically. Then Vivian's voice. You'll see smaller it for yourself. The practiced steadiness she looked gone. At the folder. I never used that mailbox. She looked at Detective the folder Whitmore. Again. This is your social media post from June of 2023. The first page in tab 3 was a single sheet of paper directly in front of that location. A small blue visitor sticker and time to the center are yours. Number 0. Would you like to revise your statement? Below it. In 11 seconds I recognized from when I was 12 years old. I want a lawyer. 3 lines. That was Dr. the end of her statement. Marsh. Through the speakerphone on Detective Whitmore's October 14th, which had never been disconnected from my parents in Tampa. Parental note I heard my mother stop breathing. The second page in tab 3 was a photocopy of the complete 2006 psychological evaluation. Listening, not the version Vivian I said submitted to the police. Calmly, that version had been cropped now. 4 pages, ending before the final section. The complete document was 6 pages. At the bottom of page 4, in Dr. Marsh's typed clinical notes, was this. Note to parents. I strongly recommend evaluation of the younger sibling. The family dynamic I observed is a significant concern, and I believe the wrong child has been brought to me for assessment. I am unable to continue treatment of the older child unless the family agrees to family therapy and the younger child is independently evaluated. Detective Whitmore read the paragraph. She read it a second time, more slowly. She checked the bottom of the page. There was an authentication stamp in the corner. Verified copy released to subject Adrian Vale, November 18, 2025. She looked up. You contacted Dr. Marsh last November. She remembered me, I said. She had been waiting 20 years for someone to ask the right question. She is 71. She still practices, part-time. Her records are intact. Detective Whitmore was quiet for 6 seconds. She turned to tab 1. Tab 1 was the current case. 11 fraudulent accounts. IP address origination records. 6 matching the residential router whose service bill Viv had screenshot me in 2022. Clean printouts of that bill alongside the application metadata. Identical down to the modem serial number. 3 accounts traced to a burner number matching the one Viv had used to contact me in 2021. The UPS store mailbox in Aurora, paired with Vivian's own Instagram photo standing directly in front of that storefront. Signature exemplars, all 11 forged applications, side by side with my actual signature card from a credit union opened in 2019. The forensic comparison was visible without any special equipment. The capital letter in my first name leaned too far right. The tail on the final letter curved the wrong direction. And then there was page 7. Page 7 was the documentation Vivian had submitted with her March 1st police complaint. The loan applications she alleged I had forged in her name to destroy her. The signatures on those documents read Vivian Vale. The forensic comparison showed something Viv had not anticipated. The handwriting on those forged Vivian signatures, in slant, in pen pressure, in the particular formation of her initials, matched the hand that had forged the Adrian signatures on all 11 fraudulent accounts. The same person had manufactured both sides. Detective Whitmore set the page down and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. I had watched forensic auditors make that exact gesture. It is the gesture of someone who has just realized the file they are holding is entirely upside down. She turned to tab 2. Tab 2 was the 20-year pattern. 14 entries, in chronological order. The Hall Pass forgery of 2009. The supplemental credit card of 2013. The Thanksgiving dinner of 2018. The wedding loan of 2022. 8 additional entries I have not described today, because the point of a pattern is the pattern, not the catalog. Detective Whitmore read 3 entries. She closed the tab. You kept a log, she said. I kept a record, I said. There's a difference. She tapped the cover of the folder twice with 2 fingers. I recognized the gesture. It is what an auditor does when she has just realized that the deeper she goes, the more she is going to find. On the screen behind us, Vivian's face was frozen in the still frame of her paused statement, mouth slightly open, mid-sentence. She did not know the folder was open. She would not know for another 6 minutes. Detective Whitmore turned back to tab 1. She picked up the federal identity theft report I had filed on January 29th, 6 weeks before Vivian filed her own complaint on March 1st. She held both documents, one in each hand. She looked at the dates. 31 days, she said. Almost to herself. Wrong direction. She picked up the desk phone. She asked a colleague to bring Vivian Vale in for follow-up questions in the adjacent interview room. She asked another to place a hold on processing my charges. She asked Marcus whether he intended to be present. Marcus said yes. While they stepped out, the desk phone rang. Detective Whitmore answered. She listened. She covered the receiver and looked at me. There is a Celia Cole on the line. She says she has corroborating documentation. She says she has been maintaining it since 2019. I nodded. Detective Whitmore put the call on speaker. Detective Whitmore, Celia said. Her voice was level and completely composed. I have supplementary documentation that corroborates what my cousin has provided. I have message screenshots, group chat archives, and confirmed dates. I have been maintaining this file since November of 2019. I'm sending everything to your department email now. I had not known she had her own folder. For 20 years, I had believed I was the only one keeping receipts. I had not been the only one. I had just been the only one who knew it. Detective Whitmore thanked her, ended the call, and walked into the adjacent room. I sat alone with Marcus for 2 minutes. He was writing something in his notepad. I looked at the folder, still open on the table between us. The blue visitor sticker was visible at the edge of tab 3. Number 0419. I thought about Dr. Marsh, 71 years old, still practicing, who had written a note in 2006 that my mother had folded into a kitchen drawer and never spoken of again. Who had waited 2 decades for someone to come back and ask the right question. I thought about Celia, who had been building her own file in Fort Collins, alone, in silence, while my folder grew in a closet 2 hours south of her. We had been keeping the same record without knowing the other existed. 20 years is a very long time to believe you are alone in seeing something clearly. Through the wall, very faintly, I heard Detective Whitmore's voice. Ms. Vale, can you explain why the IP address associated with your device matches the origination IP for 9 of 11 fraudulent accounts filed in your sister's name? A pause. Then Vivian's voice, Smaller now, the practiced steadiness gone. I never used that mailbox. Detective Whitmore, this is your social media post from June of 2023. You are standing directly in front of that location. The caption and timestamp are yours. Would you like to revise your statement? 11 seconds of silence. Then, I want a lawyer. That was the end of her statement. Through the speakerphone on Detective Whitmore's desk, which had never been disconnected from my parents in Tampa, I heard my mother stop breathing. I had not realized she was still on the line. I did not know how long she had been listening. Mom, I said into the phone, calmly. You can hang up now. She did not hang up. But she did not say another word. That was the loudest she had ever been. Detective Whitmore returned to my room at 10:34 a.m. She sat down. She looked at me, with the particular look of someone who has just spent an hour being proven wrong about something they were very confident about. Ms. Vale, she said. You're being released. The charges against you are dropped pending paperwork. We will be opening a state investigation into your sister for forgery, identity theft, and filing a false police report. I'll be referring this case to the federal field office in Denver this afternoon for review of aggravated identity theft. You should expect to be contacted within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I nodded. She looked at me for a moment longer, then said, more quietly, for what it's worth, I'm sorry it took this long for someone to read this file. It was not the apology I had spent my whole life waiting for, but it was the first one I had ever received from someone in authority, in front of a record, where it could not be walked back. Marcus carried the folder out. He insisted. It was now evidence in an active investigation and needed to be logged into chain of custody. The duty clerk made certified copies of every page, returned the originals in a sealed envelope, and handed me a printed receipt with a case number stamped at the bottom. I folded the receipt and put it in my coat pocket. In the hallway outside the booking area, my parents were waiting on a bench. My mother stood when she saw me. Her face was wet. Her hands weren't steady. She moved toward me. Adrian, please. We didn't know. We didn't know. I stopped about 4 feet away. I did not move closer. Mom, I said. You had Dr. Marsh's full report for 20 years. You knew. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She sat back down on the bench. Her shoulders came forward. Her hands settled in her lap. She did not look at me again while I was in that hallway. I think in that moment she was doing the arithmetic she had spent 2 decades refusing to complete, counting backward from the visitor sticker, year by year, holiday by holiday, and seeing for the first time the exact shape of what she had built with my name on every brick. My father walked past me 3 times in that hallway over the following 11 minutes. He said nothing. He did not look at me. That was the loudest he had ever been. Vivian was sitting alone near the booking desk. Her cardigan was rumpled. Her mascara had traveled. She looked up at me as I walked past. She did not speak. I did not speak either. There was nothing left to say in that hallway that had not already been said in tab 3. By the end of that week, things had started to come apart publicly. Someone, I never confirmed who, though I had a clear enough guess, posted screenshots of Vivian's message to my mother to a wellness industry accountability account online. Within 24 hours, the post had been shared thousands of times. By Saturday, Vivian's social media brand page had been restricted. By the end of the month, it was gone entirely. The second platform followed a week later. The $389 course was no longer available. Her signature line, "My truth is sacred," now sat on a frozen page that simply read, "This account is no longer available." I received several direct messages that week from people who had purchased the course. Each of them had cut off a family member based on what they had learned from Vivian's content. Each of them was now asking, with varying degrees of quiet horror, whether they had made the wrong decision. I read each message carefully. I did not reply to any of them. I am not anyone's boundary coach, but I sat with the question for a long time, that some of them may have walked away from people worth keeping. That is the part of this story that does not have a clean ending. I cannot make those calls for them. I do not know how many real relationships my sister fractured on her way to manufacturing the one she invented about me. By mid-April, the federal case had moved forward. A grand jury indicted Vivian on aggravated identity theft and state forgery charges. She was released on bond, which my parents signed. The federal charge carried a mandatory minimum of 2 years, consecutive. There would eventually be a plea arrangement. There would not be a full escape from what had been built in writing. I lost 2 weeks of work to administrative leave while my employer processed the initial warrant notification. Once charges were dropped, my supervisor reinstated me with a written apology. My professional certification was never at risk. The credit bureau dispute process took 4 months and was, by comparison, the most uncomplicated part of any of it. In early May, 2 months after the folder was opened, my mother sent a text. It arrived at 6:22 in the evening on a Wednesday. 4 words, I think I knew. A minute later, I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to hear it from me. I read it twice. I made tea, the kind my grandmother used to like, peppermint with a slice of lemon, and sat at my kitchen counter watching the late afternoon light travel across the floorboards. If you have ever waited years for someone to finally say they knew, drop 1 word in the comments. Just 1. I will read every single one. The following Saturday, Celia drove down from Fort Collins. She had texted me the week before and asked, very gently, whether I'd like to have dinner. I said yes. We met at a small restaurant in Capitol Hill, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and a handwritten menu. We ordered pasta. We ordered 1 glass of wine each. We did not talk about Vivian for the first 30 minutes. We talked about her dog, a small mixed breed named Marbles who was terrified of the vacuum cleaner and completely untroubled by thunderstorms. We talked about her brother. We talked about what Boulder smells like in October. Eventually she said, you know what I kept thinking the whole time I was putting my screenshots together? I kept thinking, what if she's doing the same thing? What if she's keeping a file, too? She looked at me. And there you were. I laughed. It was a small laugh, barely more than an exhale, but it was real. And it was the first one in 3 months. For the first time, the folder was not the most important thing in the room. The person across from me was. That night, I drove home with the heater running low and the radio off. I rode the elevator up to my floor, unlocked the door, turned on 1 lamp. The gray banker's box was still on the top shelf of the hallway closet, exactly where it had been for 13 years. The folder itself was in Marcus's sealed envelope, lodged with the courts as evidence in the federal case. I took the empty box down anyway, set it on the kitchen counter, looked at it for a long time. I thought about throwing it away. I thought about burning it. I did neither. I carried it back to the closet. I placed it on the top shelf, exactly where it had always been. I did not lock it. I did not seal it. I did not need to. I left it on the shelf, not because I still needed it, but because I had finally earned the right to put it down. 20 years. 1 sister. 1 folder. 1 shelf. That was enough. If you have ever been called the unstable one for noticing what was plainly there, or kept receipts in the dark because you knew that one day the lights would come on, or stayed in a family that asked you to apologize for the shape of your own handwriting, share this with the person who needs to hear it tonight. Comment 1 word in the comments. Just 1. I will be reading. My name is Adrian Vale. This time, I am the one who told the story.